Welcome to the GenAI Daily Briefing for Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. The biggest technical story today is that Moonshot AI has published the Kimi K3 paper, and it gives more substance to the panic cycle we saw over the last week. K3 is a 2.8 trillion parameter mixture of experts model with 104 billion active parameters, native vision, and a 1 million token context window. The architecture details matter here. Moonshot says K3 uses delta attention and attention residual mechanisms to maintain information flow over very long sequences and deep stacks, plus a latent mode design that routes 16 of 896 experts per token. Their headline claim is about 2.5 times better scaling efficiency versus K2. That doesn't just mean a larger model got better. It suggests they're improving the ratio between capability gains and training spend, which is where the frontier race is really being fought now. If that holds up in independent testing, K3 is important not only because it is open-ish frontier competition from China, but because it sharpens the question of whether Western labs can justify closed premiums when open-weight and semi-open systems keep closing the gap on context, multimodality, and post-training quality. Next up, Microsoft launched its first dedicated cybersecurity model alongside a more agentic security system. And in parallel, Nvidia, Microsoft, IBM, SpaceX, and others announced an open secure AI alliance focused on shared defense tooling. There are two layers to this. First, Microsoft is clearly trying to move the SoC stack from Copilot-style assistance towards supervised autonomy, triage, correlation, recommendation, and eventually containment loops that can operate at machine speed. Second, the alliance is strategically interesting because some of the biggest model labs are not in it. That tells you the split in AI security is widening between companies that want open defensive infrastructure and companies that still prefer tighter model-centric control. Technically, security remains one of the few domains where agentic workflows make immediate economic sense because the environment is tool-rich, the tasks are repetitive but high value, and partial autonomy is useful even when full autonomy is risky. The limiting factors are not model eloquence. They are policy correctness, evidence provenance, and rollback. If you're an enterprise architect, this is the pattern to watch. Narrow, high-consequence agent systems with strong observability and bounded authority. Worth flagging on the infrastructure side, Ilya Sutskever's Safe Superintelligence has announced a long-term partnership with Nvidia as it prepares to scale research. Pair that with recursive superintelligence signing a roughly $410 million compute deal with Amazon, and you get a pretty clear picture of the frontier market structure. Capital is being translated directly into reserve compute and strategic supplier alignment. This matters because we are past the phase where every new lab could remain cloud agnostic for long. Frontier efforts increasingly need not just GPUs, but network topology, memory bandwidth planning, scheduling priority, and often custom software co-design with the vendor. In practice, these partnerships function like a hybrid of foundry access and prime brokerage. They are capital commitments, but they are also signaling devices to talent and investors. We have secured the oxygen supply. On the product side, Perplexity has expanded its personal computer agent to Windows after first launching on Mac. The idea is straightforward but consequential. The PC becomes the agent runtime, with local access to files and applications, so the system can act like a general-purpose digital worker. We've been talking for a year about browser agents and SaaS agents, but the desktop remains the highest leverage integration surface in enterprise computing because so many ugly real workflows still terminate in local apps, spreadsheets, shared drives, and line-of-business software. The technical challenge is less about whether the model can click buttons and more about execution safety. Windows support means broad deployment potential, but also a giant permission surface. Any team evaluating this category should think in terms of capability envelopes. What local context is visible, what actions are reversible, what gets logged, and how secrets are isolated. This is where agent architecture starts to look more like endpoint management than chatbot UX. On the startup front, Fish Audio raised a $50 million seed round to build AI voice models for creators and enterprises. The standout detail is that it already claims more than 8 million users across open source and hosted versions and about 21 million in ARR. That combination is unusual. Open distribution, consumer scale adoption, and meaningful enterprise monetization all arriving early. Voice remains an underestimated segment because people still lump it into nice demo territory, but the economics are getting real. Speech models are now good enough that the bottleneck shifts from raw transcription quality to latency, controllability, style consistency, and rights management. If Fish can keep quality high while serving both prosumer creators and enterprise workflows, it may be a template for the next wave of modality-native companies. Open source at the edge, hosted orchestration and compliance in the middle, and enterprise SLAs at the top. On the market side, Google's AI overviews are now appearing in 43% of searches according to new tracking data. That number matters less as a product milestone than as evidence that AI-generated answers are becoming default interface behavior for discovery. Once the threshold is crossed, the internet's economic plumbing changes. Publishers lose direct clicks, SEO gets partially replaced by answer sourcing dynamics, and model-visible content quality becomes more important than page-level ranking tricks. For engineering leaders, the practical implication is that retrieval and citation optimization are no longer side projects for content-heavy businesses. They are distribution strategy. If your content isn't parsable, attributable, and fresh enough for answer engines, you're gradually becoming invisible even if your traditional search ranks still looks decent. A few papers are also worth your attention today because they hit core systems questions rather than benchmark theater. One studies long horizon planning through controlled agentic distillation and argues that planning ability is shaped across pre-training and post-training in a more measurable way than we usually admit. Another, on test time memory, reframes context eviction as an estimation problem and introduces a fixed lag smoothing view between naive online heuristics and impossible offline optimality. Translation: better memory management may come from waiting just long enough to make smarter keep or drop decisions, instead of committing instantly. There's also data orchestra, which tackles pre-training curation at the per-example level rather than applying one fixed cleaning policy to an entire corpus. That's a subtle but important shift. We've spent years treating data pipelines as bulk operations. This suggests the next efficiency gains may come from adaptive treatment of individual chunks of data based on what they contribute downstream. If it works at scale, it could become part of the standard recipe for smaller labs trying to compete with less compute. One final cautionary note: the operational risk conversation is heating back up after the OpenAI Hugging Face breach debate, and today's adjacent coverage around shared chat indexing and open model misuse reinforces the same point. The real divide is no longer open versus closed in the abstract. It is whether systems have enforceable boundaries, auditable tool use, and sane data hygiene. Governance is becoming a systems design problem, not a policy slide. What to watch next? Whether Kimi K3's claims survive third-party evaluation, whether Microsoft's security stack shows measurable autonomy rather than just better packaging, and whether desktop agents on Windows can earn trust without triggering an endpoint security backlash. Also keep an eye on compute lockups. The most important AI financing signal in 2026 may not be valuation. It may be who is guaranteed access to clusters 6 months from now. That's your briefing. We'll see you tomorrow.